You're watching HFO TV.
Hi, it's Greg Frick, partner at HFO Investment Real Estate here at HFO TV. Today we're talking with Eric Engstrom, City Planner for the City of Portland. We're going to talk about the Comprehensive Plan Update of 2014. Thanks again, Eric, for coming by.
Good to be here.
What's going on in the City of Portland? Maybe you can get a little update on kind of the process of, where it's been, where we're going, and then we can kind of get more of the details of the plan.
Yeah, we released a draft proposed plan in July of 2013, and between 2008 and around 2012, there was a huge amount of fact finding and background report preparation to sort of set the facts in order.
And what happened in 2000? I mean, what did you guys find that was maybe surprised you or a little different than what's happened in the past in terms of what's going to affect planning moving forward?
Well, the economy is really different now than it was in 1980. Bigger in many ways, different sets of industries. The housing market is really different. In the 80s and into the 90s, most residential development was single family, and even in Portland.
Yes.
Things like Forest Heights and out in the Buttes in Southeast. And these days, most of the development that we see is either in the central city or in the inner neighborhoods with multifamily or mixed-use development. So that's been a real shift in the kind of development that's happening. And
then I know we have, reading at the plan, there's some talk about maybe some down zoning on some of the land. Looking out in East County, kind of changing the zoning. Can you maybe go into a little detail about that?
Yeah, well, and this is also a difference. In the 80s and 90s, most of the planning process was about upzoning because we had to find more land for single-family housing.
Right.
And we don't have as much of that problem now because most development is happening as redevelopment or infill. But so we actually have more downzoning in this plan than we have upzoning at this point.
Okay.
And the most significant piece of that is out in the David Douglas School District area in outer southeast Portland, east of 205 and
right.
kind of south of Gateway. The issue there is school enrollment capacity and the school district not being able to keep up with the growth. And so we're not eliminating multifamily development or single-family development zoning out there. There's still quite a bit of development capacity in that area, but we are reducing the amount of acres that is zoned for that and trying to reduce the pressure on the school district a little bit.
And will it stay residential, just maybe not as high density residential? Is
Exactly.
That kind of the plan?
So
okay.
Some of what's called the R2 zoning, which is a low density multifamily zoning, is going back down to R5, which is a single family zone, or
okay.
some maybe R1 zoning going to R2.5, just taking it down a notch.
Got it. Okay. Now I know the last couple of years we've seen a lot of mixed use developments with apartments. I mean, that's what we're involved in. You've got retail, ground floor retail apartments on top. Now, is there any talk about maybe looking at kind of the mixed use zoning changes in the future, in the city or even in some of the outlying areas?
Right, there are, and we're in the midst of what we call mixed use zoning code overhaul that we're managing, and we have an advisory committee set up for that right now. That we've released a concept report in November that gives some outlines of that. But basically, most of the mixed-use zoning you're seeing is in what's called our commercial zones today,
right.
But really it's a mixed-use zone because housing is allowed. And so we're overhauling that suite of commercial zones, trying to reduce the number of zones, simplify it a little bit, but also now that we've got a decade of mixed-use development under our belt, we're starting to see where the rubs are and what's working and not working. And so it's really a code refinement project to improve the outcomes of those zones, not big upzoning or downzoning. It's intended to be fairly neutral in terms of the overall allowances, but it changes some of the design standards potentially and the floor area ratios.
Got it. So you can look at some of the mixed-use deals that have been done in the last 10 years and say, okay, this worked, this didn't work. We need to make these design changes or restrictions on, again, not on the zoning, but maybe the design review. And
yeah, we actually have a catalog on our website of the 100 or so mixed-use buildings that have been built in the last 5 years, and just pictures and all the facts about them, and just have been going through those and figuring out what's working well or not working, and what are we surprised by.
Right. And I know one question, for multifamily investors that are primarily our audience is, job growth. And, where is there in the industrial side, everybody wants the industrial jobs and the growth and the land. How do you work on finding pieces for that when it's competing for where people are going to live?
Yeah, we have an industrial and employment land strategy built into the plan that relies on kind of a mix of intensification.
Okay.
So things like the the new building over in the Northwest Industrial area. That's the 5-story employment-related
Yes.
building. I think the New York, or I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
But so there's some of that. There's also an important job to clean up brownfields and reuse those lands for employment. Some of the land strategy relates to making the right kind of transportation investments to make some of the existing vacant land more usable. If you have a piece of vacant employment land but you can't get to it, or there's too much congestion to have a second shift, we could be doing a better job of serving our existing land. So
Right.
it's part of it is an investment strategy in transportation. Very little just outright converting residential land to employment land, because there's not much opportunity in Portland to do that.
Right.
We are looking still at converting some of the golf course land, zoning it so that if those golf courses wanted to redevelop for employment, that some of them could, and that's still on the table.
So it'd be like an overlay on top of an existing golf course down the future if for some reason.
Yeah, we
went
wouldn't
out of it.
necessarily change the zoning today, but we'd give it a land use designation at the comprehensive plan level that says they could change to
At some
that in
point.
the future at some point. Yeah.
And maybe you could explain, because this again for the city of Portland, how do you guys work? How does this group work with Beaverton, Gresham? Is there communication with Clark County on how we're working together to try to make this kind of a
Yeah, well, we all operate within the regional planning framework, and we all meet with Metro around the table pretty regularly to coordinate what each of us is doing. We're working directly with, for example, with Gresham on transportation plans for the Powell Division Corridor for high-capacity transit improvements there. There's a lot of coordination clustered around the Southwest Transit Corridor as well, and both land use and transportation planning, so working with Tualatin Tigard on those issues.
Got it. And then how do you? And I'm sure part of the fact finding in 12 was kind of looking at the changing of the way people live today. I mean, the millennials with, wanting to be close to the core, wanting, the 20-minute neighborhood within their little core, they can walk, 2 blocks to find all their things. I mean, that's probably is that the basis kind of the plan moving forward, trying to keep that?
Yeah, in 2012, the City Council adopted the Portland Plan, which was a bigger picture framework document, and in there was this concept of the 20-minute neighborhood, or the complete healthy connected neighborhood, where we're trying to grow in a centers and corridors based strategy, at least on the residential and neighborhood employment side. Right. And that does involve neighborhood focused areas and looking at infill in the neighborhood and on those main commercial streets.
Now, are the other cities buying into that as well? Just in your experience?
It's not entirely a new concept for the region. The 2040 plan at the regional level is built on the idea of centers and corridors, and we're just taking it to a local level and saying what that looks like in Portland is this, and it has these benefits of further boosting our existing commercial districts, and it helps with reducing the road congestion, because we want to convert more trips to local walking or biking trips by having things more available close by.
Okay. Now you were telling me before we started there's an online map app where somebody could go online, look at their property address and see what kind of the potential change may be, or what you're looking at.
Yeah, even though the public hearings are now closed, the public record is still open, and so through March 2015 you can still submit written comments either online or just sending us a letter. And a good way to find out what's going on, at least on the land use map side, is to look at our map app, which has, like you said, you can click on properties and learn exactly what's changing and why, and then there's some further information you can follow.
Okay, there's the ability, if they want to make a comment, they can.
Yeah, you can actually submit a comment right in the map app, and,
you can? Okay.
That'll be considered testimony. It gets delivered to our Planning and Sustainability Commission.
Oh, nice. That's good. And anything? Any surprises that in this whole process? That, we've been talking, I know, for years, that kind of where this is going, or where you think it's going to go. Anything that's kind of out of left field for you, or?
Not so much out of left field. So I can tell you a couple of the things that have attracted a lot of attention. One is the fate of West Hayden Island out in the Columbia River, and whether that would be a marine terminal in the future. That's attracted a lot of testimony. Continuing to get a lot of testimony about parking and neighborhood infill and residential demolitions, and what new infill development looks like. a lot of testimony about transportation policy and what exactly we're building to handle transportation demand in the future. So there's a couple clusters of really important issues.
And when you do, like, let's talk about like the parking as an example. We do I know parking's been a huge concern, big question about on the multifamily development. Do you guys, when you kind of do this comprehensive plan, are you getting down all the way down to the design standards and requirements, or is this more higher level? Then it kind of works its way.
Right. It's in two stages. The thing before the Planning and Sustainability Commission right now is that higher level policy and land use map. But we do have an implementation phase that will be going to the Commission in 2015. And part of that phase is this rewrite of our commercial mixed-use zones. And in that project, we are getting down into what are the design standards, what are the allowed floor area ratios, what is the relationship between the new buildings and the neighboring houses and things like that.
Okay. Well, thank you again for coming. It's great.
Thank you.
If you wanted more information, you can see on the website here. I'm sure we'll be talking again in the next futures as this plan continues to kind of take shape. So
Yeah, good talking to you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks.
That was great. Thank you.
Thanks for watching HFO TV. To learn more about HFO, call or visit our website.